The life that looked perfect, but felt completely empty. He always looked like he had everything together. A good job in downtown Chicago, a furnished apartment with smart lights and city view windows, a fast car, a gym membership, a social circle that posted living my best life every single weekend. But inside, something felt hollow, like a constant ache he'd learned to ignore. Most nights, he would come home after work, drop his bag on the couch, and let the glow of his TV fill the room. He scrolled until his thumb hurt, switching from apps to notifications to meaningless conversations. The silence behind the screen scared him. It reminded him that nothing in his life actually felt real. There were moments, tiny, uncomfortable moments, when old memories surfaced. Memories of his childhood, when he used to hear his mother softly reciting Quran in the morning. Memories of the masjid his father took him to on occasional Fridays. Back then, he didn't understand much, but he remembered one thing clearly: the peace on their faces, a peace he had never felt as an adult. He tried to bury that thought. After all, he was living the American dream, right? Work hard, enjoy life, make money, keep moving. No time to think about the soul. But there were nights he would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why, despite all his achievements, he felt like a stranger to himself. Why happiness never stayed, no matter how much he earned. Why heartbreak hit him so deeply. Why sins, mistakes, and bad decisions followed him like shadows he couldn't outrun. Then something unexpected happened. It was a cold March evening. He was walking back from the grocery store, bundled in a hoodie, hands frozen from the wind blowing through Lake Michigan. As he passed by a small neighborhood masjid, he heard something soft, rhythmic, familiar, not loud, not calling him, just there, floating in the air like a whisper. It was Quran, a recitation he hadn't heard since he was a child. He paused just for a second, but that second felt strangely heavy, like his heart recognized something his mind had long forgotten. He didn't go inside. He didn't even step closer, but he walked home with a feeling he hadn't felt in years, an unsettling pull, a reminder buried deep in the soul. Something inside him shifted that night, quietly, like the very first crack in a long frozen heart. He didn't know it yet, but Ramadan was coming, and with it, the journey that would change his life forever. The childhood he forgot, the peace he once knew. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual, not because he wanted to, but because sleep had refused to stay. His mind kept replaying that sound from the night before, the Quran echoing from the masjid door, as if someone had opened a window straight into his past. He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his eyes, and for the first time in years, his thoughts drifted to the childhood he had worked so hard to outgrow. He remembered being 8, sitting cross-legged on the carpet in the living room, while his mother traced her finger across a mushaf. Her voice was soft, but full of warmth, like it carried the whole world inside it. She wasn't a scholar. She just recited because it made her heart calm. Even as a child, he felt that calmness, like the world slowed down for a moment whenever she said Bismillah. He remembered Ramadan back then, how the kitchen smelled like samosas and dates at iftar, how the family gathered around the small dining table, waiting for Maghrib, laughing, talking, being together. He remembered his father holding his hand on the way to the masjid for Taraweeh, the street lamps glowing above them. He didn't understand the Arabic, didn't understand the depth of worship, but he remembered something deeper than meaning. He remembered belonging. Then life changed. His dad lost his job. The family struggled. Arguments became common. Eventually, the pressure moved them to a new city where everything, school, friends, culture felt different. Religion slowly faded into the background, not out of rebellion, but out of exhaustion. The world kept asking more from him, and faith slipped away quietly. By high school, he didn't pray. By college, he barely remembered Surah Fatiha. By adulthood, he told himself he had moved on. He sighed as these memories surfaced now, years later, uninvited but powerful. They made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: guilt. Not the kind that crushes, but the kind that wakes you up. While making coffee, he caught himself whispering a phrase he hadn't said in years. "Ya Allah." It slipped out naturally, like the soul spoke before the mind could stop it. He stood there frozen, the coffee machine humming behind him. Why did he say that? Why today? He didn't have the answer, but somewhere deep inside, a forgotten door had opened. A door leading back to the peace he once knew. Before life pulled him away, the wounds no one saw, and the heartbreak that changed him. The day went on like any other meetings. Deadlines, emails, fake smiles. But something felt different inside him. His heart was quieter, almost sensitive, as if a layer of numbness had peeled off. That night, when he got home, memories kept pushing their way back in, especially the ones he never talked about. Heartbreak, the kind that doesn't bruise the skin, but breaks something much deeper. He had loved once, not casually, not out of loneliness, but deeply. He thought she was the one person who saw him, who understood his silence, his dreams, his fears. They planned a future, talked late into the night, shared everything. She liked his ambition. He liked her softness. They balanced each other, but the relationship didn't survive the world they lived in. Different values, different priorities, different directions. She wanted a life that moved fast, glittered, sparkled. He tried to keep up, but somewhere along the way, he lost pieces of himself. The breakup was quiet, no screaming, no dramatic goodbye, just a message. "I think we're growing in different directions." He read it 4 times. His chest tightened. Something inside him fell apart. And that night, he went out with friends, laughed too loudly, drank too much sugar, scrolled until dawn, did anything to avoid the truth. He was hurting deeply. Since then, he kept people at a distance. He buried emotions under work, goals, hustle, distractions. He forced himself to be the strong, successful one, the one who never needed anyone. But pain, no matter how buried, finds a way to return. As he sat on his couch now, the TV flashing empty noise, he whispered to himself, "Why does this still hurt?" Then another question slipped in, one he had never dared to ask. Would I be this broken if I had stayed close to Allah? He swallowed hard. It was the first time he recognized the truth. His heartbreak wasn't just about losing someone. It was about losing himself, losing guidance, losing the anchor that once kept him steady. He leaned back, eyes burning slightly. Maybe the emptiness wasn't random. Maybe it was a sign up or something calling him back. Back to peace. Back to purpose. Back to the one who heals wounds no one else can see. And Ramadan was now only days away. The night he couldn't run from his sins anymore. The weekend arrived, but instead of bringing relief, it carried a strange heaviness. He tried everything to distract himself, cleaned the apartment, played music, ordered takeout, even scrolled through old messages he should have deleted long ago. But nothing worked. His mind felt crowded. That night, he sat on his balcony, city lights glowing below, cold breeze brushing past him. Normally, this view comforted him. Tonight, it exposed him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to look honestly at his life, the mistakes, the shortcuts, the sins he pretended weren't sins. He remembered the lies he told to dodge responsibility, the people he hurt because he couldn't handle commitment, the nights he wasted chasing temporary highs, the prayers he abandoned, the guilt he had buried under its just life. But sitting there under the open sky, those excuses felt embarrassingly small. He whispered to himself, "When did I become this person?" Silence answered. A memory surfaced, uninvited but sharp. He was 15, sitting in a masjid during Ramadan. The Imam had spoken about sins being black dots on the heart. When a person keeps ignoring Allah, he said, the heart becomes blind. But a single sincere tear can wipe years of darkness. That line hit him now like a punch. Was his heart blind? He rubbed his face, suddenly overwhelmed. For so long, he had blamed the world, circumstances, heartbreak, stress. But deep down, he knew he had chosen paths that pulled him away from Allah. And now he felt the consequences: loneliness that no friend could fix, emptiness that no achievement could fill. He exhaled shakily as another realization hit him. Ramadan was almost here, a month he used to love as a child, a month he hadn't respected in years, a month Allah placed every year as a chance to return. Maybe this is my chance too, he whispered. He didn't cry, he wasn't ready for that. But something inside him softened, like the first drop of thaw in a long winter. Before going inside, he looked up at the sky again. He didn't know how to make things right. He didn't know where to begin. But he said something small, something simple. Allah, if you're still there for me, guide me back. It was the most honest prayer he had made in years. And though he didn't feel it yet, that tiny whisper was the beginning of his transformation. The first step back, even when he felt unworthy. The next morning felt different, not lighter, not happier, but aware. He woke up with a strange tension in his chest, like something inside him had shifted but didn't know where to settle. He moved slowly, almost cautious, as if afraid the feeling might disappear if he rushed. While brushing his teeth, he glanced at himself in the mirror. For the first time in years, he didn't see the confident, put-together version he projected to the world. He saw a man who was tired, spiritually tired, emotionally tired, tired of pretending he didn't need Allah. He whispered under his breath, I don't even know how to begin. He wasn't lying. He didn't know how to pray properly anymore. He didn't remember most surahs. He wasn't sure what repentance even looked like after years of drifting so far, and that thought scared him. By the afternoon, he felt restless enough to step outside. Without planning it, his feet took him back toward that same neighborhood masjid. Not inside, just close enough to look at it from across the street. A few men walked in for dua. They looked normal, everyday people. A delivery worker, an older uncle, a college student. None of them looked perfect, and that gave him a strange kind of hope. Maybe Allah didn't expect perfection. Maybe Allah just expected a step. His heart pounded as he stood there. Walking inside felt impossible, but walking away felt wrong. So he stayed on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, pretending to check his phone while stealing glances at the door. Every time someone walked in, his chest tightened. He wasn't ready, not today, but before leaving, he did something small, something only Allah saw. He placed his hand over his heart and whispered, "Ya Allah, I want to come back, but I'm scared." He felt ridiculous saying it out loud. Yet somehow, the wind felt warmer. The fear felt lighter. As he walked home, he realized something important. You don't return to Allah in one dramatic moment. You return in tiny steps, hesitant, shaky, imperfect, step by step, until your heart remembers the way. And today, he had taken his first real step back, not by entering the masjid, but by wanting to. Ramadan was now only 3 days away, and his soul slowly, quietly was preparing for a homecoming it didn't yet understand. Ramadan's breeze and the restlessness of a soul waking up. 2 days before Ramadan, something subtle but undeniable began happening inside him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was more like a quiet stirring, like his soul had been asleep for years and was suddenly blinking awake. All morning at work, he felt distracted, not the usual tired, overworked distraction, but a deep restlessness. He kept checking the calendar on his phone, looking at the date without knowing why. Every time he saw how close Ramadan was, his heart tightened a little. At lunch, he sat alone by the office window, watching people cross the busy street. He noticed something he hadn't realized in years. Ramadan used to excite him. As a child, he would count the hours until the first fast, watch the moon from the rooftop with his father, wait for that magical announcement, Ramadan Mubarak. But now, he wasn't sure if he deserved the blessing he once looked forward to. He sighed, pushing his food away. "Why am I feeling like this?" he whispered, because deep down, his soul was remembering. On his way home, he drove past a halal grocery store. Something inside nudged him soft, persistent. Before he could overthink it, he parked the car and walked in. The store smelled like spices and nostalgia. Dates were stacked near the entrance. Ramadan lanterns hung from the ceiling. Families filled their carts with excitement. Kids running around with samosa boxes. Mothers reminding them to behave. He stood there quietly, absorbing the scene. For a moment, he felt like an outsider. Everyone seemed so connected, so ready. He felt like a stranger who had wandered into a place that used to be home. But then an older man beside him smiled warmly and said, "Ramadan Mubarak early, brother." The word brother hit something inside him. After years of feeling spiritually alone, someone without even knowing him reminded him that he still belonged. Somewhere, somehow, he picked up a small box of dates. Not a full grocery cart, Not a big Ramadan plan, just dates, a symbolic gesture, a quiet promise to himself. As he drove home with that small box sitting on the passenger seat, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he was still broken. Maybe his past was still heavy. But Ramadan was coming, and Allah was gently calling his heart back. For the first time in years, he felt like he might actually answer. The night before Ramadan, when fear and hope finally met, the night before Ramadan felt different from all the nights before it. Not because the city changed, Chicago was still loud, busy, glowing with neon lights, but because he wasn't the same man anymore. Not completely, not yet, but something inside him was shifting, gently, steadily, like the tide returning to shore. He sat in his living room with the lights dimmed, the box of dates on the table in front of him. He kept staring at it, as if it held all the answers. It was strange how something so small could feel like a symbol of something so big. He checked social media and saw friends posting about Ramadan, some excited, some reflective, some sharing memories with family. Their captions read Ramadan Mubarak, ready for a new beginning. May Allah accept. He felt a pinch of guilt. He wasn't ready. He hadn't prayed in years. He barely remembered Surah Ikhlas. And part of him wondered if stepping into Ramadan like this was disrespectful. He whispered to himself, "What if Allah is disappointed in me?" That fear had lived inside him for years, silent, heavy, poisoning every attempt to return. It was easier to stay away than to face the possibility of rejection. But tonight, something softened. He remembered something his mother used to say during Ramadan when he was a child. Allah waits for his servants with more love than a mother waits for her lost child. He closed his eyes. If that was true, maybe he wasn't walking into Ramadan alone. Maybe Allah had been guiding him step by step through heartbreak, emptiness, guilt, restlessness, just to bring him to this night. The clock struck 11:57 p.m., 3 minutes until the moon would be officially announced. His heart thudded. This was happening. Ramadan, the month of mercy, forgiveness, healing, was only moments away. He stood up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The sky was cloudy, the moon hidden, but he still searched for it like a child searching for hope. His phone buzzed, a message in his family group. Ramadan Mubarak. He swallowed hard. With trembling hands, he held the window frame and whispered something he had been afraid to say for years. "Ya Allah, I'm coming back. Please don't let me fall again." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't memorized. It was real. And in that moment, just hours before the first fast, his heart finally felt a flicker of peace. A quiet, gentle assurance. Allah had been waiting for him all along. The first suhoor, when his heart whispered begin, his alarm rang at 4:15 a.m. For a moment, he didn't recognize the sound. Suhoor wasn't part of his life anymore. Not for years, but today, his first Ramadan, as a returning soul, he forced himself out of bed. The apartment was cold and dim. No family bustling in the kitchen. No mother warming parathas. No siblings laughing sleepily. Just him and the quiet. He walked into the kitchen and opened the box of dates he had bought 2 days earlier. He placed 3 of them on a small plate added a glass of water, and stared at the table. It looked simple, too simple. He sat down slowly. His hands were slightly trembling, not from hunger, but from the weight of the moment. Suhoor wasn't just a meal, it was a declaration, a quiet announcement to himself and to Allah. I'm trying. He took a date, whispered Bismillah, and ate it. The sweetness surprised him. It brought back childhood memories, warm kitchens, family prayers, laughter, peaceful mornings. Memories he had buried under years of rushing and forgetting. For a moment, he closed his eyes and let that sweetness sink in. After finishing, he checked the time. 4:52 a.m., 7 minutes left until Fajr. He wasn't ready to pray. Not yet. The fear of doing it wrong, reciting wrong, standing wrong, forgetting the steps paralyzed him. He whispered, "Ya Allah, I don't know how to pray properly anymore, but I want to try this Ramadan. Please guide me." He didn't hear a voice. He didn't feel a miracle, but something inside him loosened, like Allah had quietly accepted his hesitation. He opened a prayer app, trying to memorize the steps. But the more he read, the more overwhelmed he felt. Guilt crept in again. Everyone else is starting strong, and I'm here, struggling with the basics. But then a thought entered his mind, simple, yet powerful. Every saint started with a single step. Every believer had a first prayer. Allah doesn't ask for perfection, He asks for sincerity. As the adhan time approached, the app displayed, Fajr has begun. He didn't pray, not yet, but he placed his hand over his chest and said softly, Allah, this fast is for you. It was imperfect, incomplete, but real. As dawn light slowly crept into his apartment, he realized something incredible. This was the first morning in years when he didn't feel empty, the first suhoor of his return, and his heart had finally whispered, begin, the first fast, and the silence that finally spoke to him. The first day of fasting felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory. His body wasn't used to it. His mind wasn't ready for it. But his soul needed it. He left for work earlier than usual. The streets still quiet under a pale morning sky. Normally he grabbed a coffee on the way, an expensive habit he used to depend on. Today, as he passed the cafe, he felt a strange sense of power. Not arrogance, but control. For once, he wasn't a slave to routine. Inside the office, everything felt the same, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, people talking about weekend plans. But he felt like he wasn't the same. Hunger came early, around 10 a.m. Not a sharp pain, but a dull reminder that he had chosen self-control over comfort. He took a slow breath and whispered silently, for you, Allah. By noon, the fast wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Food wasn't the problem. The real challenge was the silence, the stillness, the sudden awareness of thoughts he had always drowned in noise. He sat at his desk, staring at his screen, but thinking about his life, his mistakes, his regrets, the years he wasted chasing everything except Allah. The guilt was heavy, but oddly cleansing. During lunch, when his colleagues went out to eat, he stayed back, not because he wanted to be alone, but because he needed to be. He opened his phone and searched how to pray again for beginners. A simple search, but for him, it felt like climbing a mountain. He spent the lunch hour learning step by step how to stand, how to bow, what to recite. His heart raced as he listened to Surah Fatiha, a surah he once knew by heart as a child. Hearing it again felt like coming home. By late afternoon, the hunger grew stronger, but so did something else, a feeling he couldn't describe. A softness in his chest, a quietness in his thoughts, a peace he had never felt in his adult life. As sunset neared, he sat in his car, a single date in hand. The sky glowed orange, the city lights flickered awake, and he whispered, "Ya Allah, thank you for letting me reach this moment." When the time for Maghrib hit, he broke his fast with that one date, letting the sweetness melt slowly on his tongue. He didn't pray Maghrib yet. He wasn't ready. But he closed his eyes and let gratitude wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Fasting hadn't drained him. It had awakened him. The night of Taraweeh, when his feet trembled but his heart knew. Maghrib ended quietly. He sat alone in his apartment, eating a simple iftar, 3 dates, a bowl of soup, and water. No big spread, no family gathering, no laughter, but there was something new tonight. A pull toward the masjid. He had passed that building countless times, but never entered. Taraweeh used to be a childhood memory, him holding his father's hand, trying not to fall asleep as the imam recited long surahs. Back then, he didn't understand the beauty. Today, he feared he wasn't worthy of it. But the pull wouldn't go away. So at 8:45 p.m., he stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his jacket nervously. What if I do something wrong? What if people judge me? What if I stand there clueless? But then a voice inside whispered, "What if Allah is inviting you?" That thought was enough. He drove slowly, heart pounding harder the closer he got. Cars lined the street, families walking with prayer mats, kids running ahead excitedly. He felt small, out of place, like a stranger among people who belonged to something he had lost. At the masjid door, he hesitated. He almost turned back. Almost. But then a man, maybe in his 40s, smiled at him warmly and said, "Come on in, brother. Taraweeh is starting." Brother. That single word dissolved half his fear. He slipped inside quietly, removing his shoes, placing them on the rack. The smell of clean carpet, the soft murmurs of people settling, the echo of Quran warming up the microphone. It all hit him like a wave of familiarity. He found a spot in the back corner. When the imam said, "Allahu Akbar," his heart thudded painfully. He followed the movements as best as he could, standing, bowing, prostrating, hoping no one noticed how unsure he was. Then the recitation began. The imam's voice was calm, steady, deep, and the words he once recited easily now felt like they were being recited for him. Every verse sounded like a message, every pause like a reminder, every ayah like a whisper from Allah. "Come back, my servant. I never left you." Halfway through the prayer, his eyes burned. He wasn't crying, not yet, but his chest ached with years of distance melting all at once. When Taraweeh ended, he sat still, unable to move, feeling something he hadn't felt in decades: belonging. As people left, he stayed seated in the quiet masjid, staring at the carpet, whispering, "Ya Allah, thank you for letting me step inside." For the first time in years, He wasn't a lost soul wandering. He was a soul finally finding its way home. The first real doer. When his voice finally broke. The night after Taraweeh stayed with him long after he left the masjid. He kept replaying the Imam's recitation in his mind. The rise and fall of each ayah. The calm rhythm of the prayer rose. The feeling of being surrounded by believers, yet held gently by Allah alone. But something still felt incomplete, like a door had opened, but he hadn't stepped through it yet. The next evening, after breaking his fast, he found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom. No dramatic setup, no prayer mat, no special light, just him in the soft glow of a small lamp, feeling a strange heaviness in his chest. He had prayed nothing yet, not Maghrib, not Isha, not even Taraweeh. He was still scared of doing it wrong. But Dua didn't require perfection, just honesty. So he took a deep breath and whispered, almost shyly, "Allah, it's me." Those 3 words cracked something open inside him. He didn't know where to begin. He didn't even know how to talk to Allah anymore. But once the first sentence left his lips, the rest came like a flood. "Allah, I've been gone so long. I've messed up more than I can admit. I've hurt myself. I've ignored you. I've chased everything except you." His voice shook. His chest tightened. "I don't know why you still give me chances. Why you let me see another Ramadan. Why you let me walk into the masjid last night. But thank you." His breath quivered. For years, he had carried guilt like a weight he couldn't drop. Tonight, that weight finally loosened. "I don't deserve your mercy, but I need it. I'm trying, Allah. I'm really trying." He paused, wiping his eyes before tears could fall. But they came anyway. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, trembling tears of someone who had finally stopped running. "I don't know how to pray properly," he continued. "I don't know how to be who I was, or who I'm supposed to be. But guide me, just guide me back." When he finally lifted his head, it felt like he had emptied years of pain in that single moment. He had prayed without ruku, without sujud, without memorized words. But it was the most sincere worship he had done in a decade. And he knew, absolutely knew, Allah had heard him. He wiped his face, breathing deeply, feeling lighter than he had in years. Tonight, he didn't become religious. He didn't become perfect. But he did something far more powerful. He talked to Allah after years of silence. And for the first time, his heart felt the answer. The night when destiny whispered. That night, something felt different around Ayaan. Ramadan had slowly been reshaping him, softening the edges, calming the storms, and awakening a depth inside him that he never knew existed. But tonight, it felt like destiny itself was about to speak to him in a whisper. After iftar, Ayaan walked into his grandmother's room. She was sitting peacefully, her fingers gliding across the prayer beads, her lips moving gently as if every word carried a blessing. Ayaan sat beside her quietly. Without even looking up, she smiled and said, "You know, my son, Ramadan doesn't only change your routine, it changes your heart. Sometimes the biggest blessings come silently, so silently that you don't even realize. Your life is being rewritten." Ayaan froze. Was that what was happening to him? Was this peace inside him a blessing he hadn't recognized. His grandmother continued, her voice soft but full of wisdom. The most powerful blessings are the ones you cannot see. They arrive without sound, without announcement. Just like the wind, you can't hold it, but without it you cannot survive. Ayaan lowered his head. For the first time, her words didn't just reach his ears. They reached his soul. That night, he went to the roof and looked up at the sky. The stars were the same, but they didn't feel the same. They looked brighter, closer, almost as if they were watching him, guiding him. He felt something inside, something pure, something calming, like his heart was being washed from the inside. Ramadan wasn't just teaching him patience. It was teaching him identity. It was teaching him who he could become. As the cool breeze touched his face, he whispered softly, "Ya Allah, if this peace is from you, don't take it away from me." And at that moment, his heart felt lighter than ever. Not because something happened outside, but because something awakened inside. What Ayaan didn't know was this: tonight was not a conclusion. Tonight was an opening, a doorway to tests, blessings, transformations, all waiting for him in the journey ahead. The weight of old wounds. Ayaan didn't plan on revisiting his past that night. But Ramadan has a strange way of opening doors you thought were permanently closed. As he sat on the edge of his bed scrolling through old photos, one picture stopped him cold: his younger self, smiling with a purity he no longer recognized. Ayaan stared at it, feeling something tighten inside his chest. "When did I lose that version of me?" he whispered. The next picture hit harder. His first heartbreak. The moment everything inside him changed. He remembered that day like a fresh bruise. How he trusted too deeply. How he broke too quietly. How he walked away pretending to be strong while his soul collapsed inside. That heartbreak wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. It pushed him into distractions, temptations, and sins that he used to swear he'd never touch. Ramadan had been softening his heart, but this memory, it shook him. Ayaan closed his eyes. That pain, that betrayal, those sleepless nights, he had buried all of it under the noise of American life work. Parties, late-night drives, fake smiles. But Ramadan doesn't let old wounds stay hidden. Ayaan sat back, taking a deep breath. Maybe this was the moment Allah wanted him to face the truth. His phone buzzed. A message from his ex after years. "I hope Ramadan brings you peace. You deserve it." Ayaan felt a strange stillness. Once, those words would have destroyed him. Tonight, they didn't. They simply reminded him of how far he had drifted and how far he had come back. He whispered, "Ya Allah, maybe I wasn't betrayed. Maybe I was redirected." The pain that once shattered him now felt different, like a chapter, not a curse. He finally realized Allah had taken that person out of his life not to break him, but to rebuild him. Ayaan looked again at the picture of his younger self and smiled softly. He wasn't that person anymore. He was someone scarred, but growing, broken, but healing, lost, but returning. For the first time in years, he felt gratitude for the heartbreak that once haunted him. It wasn't the end of his story, it was the beginning of his return. And Ramadan was the bridge guiding him home. Sins that never let him sleep. The next morning, Ayaan woke up with a heaviness he couldn't shake. Ramadan had opened his heart, But opening the heart also means facing the shadows hiding inside it. And Ayaan had many, too many. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his own reflection as if it belonged to someone else. A man who carried secrets, regrets, and sins that he had tried to outrun for years. America gave him freedom, but with that freedom came choices, and with choices came mistakes. Mistakes he never had the courage to confront. Late-night parties, drunken weekends, relationships he knew were wrong, moments he hoped Allah would forget. But Allah never forgets, he forgives. And for the first time, Ayaan felt that difference. He sat on his prayer mat after Fajr, knees weak, hands trembling. His chest tightened as the memories of those sins flashed like lightning fast. Sharp, unforgiving, he whispered, almost afraid of his own voice, "Ya Allah, how do I come back from all of this?" The silence in the room felt heavy, but not empty, not hopeless. He remembered a line his Imam once said, "The door of repentance stays open until the soul reaches the throat." Meaning, as long as you're breathing, you still have a chance. Ayaan wiped his face and opened the Quran. The first verse his eyes fell on was almost like an answer from the heavens. "Do not despair of the mercy of Allah." His breath caught. A warmth spread through him like someone placed a gentle hand over his heart. Maybe Allah wasn't pushing him away. Maybe Allah was pulling him back. He stayed on the prayer mat for a long time, letting the tears roll freely. Not tears of fear, but tears of cleansing. Tears of someone who had been carrying a mountain for years, finally putting it down. For the first time, he didn't run from his sins. He faced them, owned them, and surrendered them to Allah. A quiet peace settled inside him. Ayaan realized something powerful. Ramadan wasn't just about fasting or nighttime prayers. It was about forgiveness, about wiping the dust off a heart that had been buried for too long. And tonight, the cleaning had finally begun. The first night of true repentance. Ayaan had cried before, but he had never cried like this. Tonight felt heavier, deeper, almost sacred. The house was quiet after Taraweeh, the lights dim, the world asleep. But Ayaan was wide awake, sitting alone in the corner of his room with the Quran still open in front of him. His heart felt fragile, as if one wrong breath could break it all over again. He wasn't crying out of sadness. He wasn't crying out of fear. He was crying because his soul had finally reached the point of truth. He whispered softly, "Ya Allah, I am ashamed of the person I became." The words trembled out of him, honest and raw. Every sin he had committed, every mistake, every reckless moment flashed in his mind. But instead of crushing him, they humbled him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't hiding from Allah. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't masking his regrets with laughter, distractions, or the fast-paced rhythm of American life. He was finally standing spiritually on the ground he had been avoiding for years. Ayaan raised his hands in a way he never had before. Not casually, not mechanically, but with purpose, with surrender. "Ya Allah, I have no excuses, only regrets. Please, don't let my sins define me. Don't let my past bury my future. I'm trying to come back. I'm trying to return to you." His voice cracked mid-dua, and then something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, subtle, like a soft breeze entering a closed room. Ayaan felt his heart loosen. The guilt didn't disappear, but it stopped suffocating him. It stopped chaining him. It felt like mercy. He wiped his tears with the sleeve of his hoodie and took a deep breath. For the first time, repentance didn't feel like weakness. It felt like rebuilding, like he was stitching himself back together with every tear, every prayer, every whisper. He remembered a hadith he once heard. Allah is happier with the repentance of his servant than a traveler who finds his lost camel in the desert. Ayaan wasn't a traveler in a desert, but he had been lost. And tonight, he had finally turned around. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, he wasn't afraid of Allah. Tonight, he felt close to him, closer than he had in his entire life. The night his heart finally spoke honestly. The next night arrived with a calm Ayaan couldn't explain. It wasn't the loud kind of peace, the kind that comes after big moments or major achievements. No, this was quieter, deeper, like his soul had finally stopped running. After Isha, Ayaan sat in his car outside the masjid. He didn't start the engine. He didn't play music. He didn't scroll his phone. He just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, breathing slowly. For years, he had lived with a heart full of noise, stress, guilt, broken memories, and the heavy weight of choices he wished he could erase. But today, his heart felt different, almost as if it was finally ready to talk to him. And he was finally ready to listen. He leaned back and whispered into the silence. Who am I becoming? The question was honest, unfiltered, real. Ayaan wasn't expecting an answer, but the stillness around him felt like one. Ramadan wasn't just changing his habits, it was rewriting his story. The man who once drowned himself in entertainment now found silence comforting. The man who once ran from prayer now felt incomplete without it. The man who once used distractions to escape was now searching inward. Bravely, he remembered something his father used to say when he was young. A loud life doesn't mean a strong life. Back then, Ayaan ignored it. Tonight, he understood it. He pulled out his prayer beads, ones he hadn't touched in years, and began whispering dhikr. Each word felt like polishing a dusty mirror inside him, clearing it, softening it. Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. With every repetition, something inside him aligned. He finally admitted something he'd never said out loud. I've spent so many years trying to look strong, when all I ever wanted was peace. And peace was exactly what Ramadan was giving him. Not the kind bought in a store, not the kind faked on social media, but the kind that settles in the heart when Allah is finally remembered sincerely. Ayaan rested his head on the steering wheel, eyes closed, letting the peace sink into every corner of his being. For the first time, he realized something powerful. His return to Allah didn't begin with perfection. It began with honesty. And tonight, his heart had spoken honestly for the first time in years. The Taraweeh night that broke him open. Ayaan thought he understood Taraweeh. Stand, recite, bow, repeat. A routine, a tradition. But tonight, Taraweeh wasn't a ritual. It was a mirror, a doorway, a storm inside his chest. The masjid was packed, rows stretching wall to wall. The imam's voice flowed through the speakers with a softness that felt like it was entering straight through Ayaan's ribcage. The Quran wasn't just being recited tonight. It was speaking. As the verses rolled through the hall, Ayaan felt something tightening in his chest. Ayahs about returning to Allah. Ayahs about mercy. Ayahs about those who sinned, broke, fell, and still found their way back. Each verse felt like it was aimed directly at him. He tried to keep his composure. He tried to breathe normally. But when the Imam recited, "And my mercy encompasses all things," Ayaan's eyes stung instantly. He swallowed hard, trying not to break down in the middle of the row. But the Quran kept hitting him with truth after truth, peeling layers he didn't know he still had. His knees felt weak. His hands trembled. His heart, softened by weeks of Ramadan, finally cracked open. During sujud, he couldn't hold it anymore. His forehead touched the ground, and his tears followed. He whispered into the carpet, "Ya Allah, I've been gone for so long. Please, don't let me get lost again." It wasn't a fancy dua. It wasn't poetic. It was raw, honest, from a heart that had been bleeding silently for years. When Taraweeh ended, people around him left smiling, talking, greeting one another. But Ayaan stayed seated, motionless, lost in a stillness he had never felt before. Something inside him had changed tonight. It wasn't motivation. It wasn't emotion. It wasn't temporary. It was transformation. He realized that no matter how far he had drifted, no matter how dirty his hands felt, no matter how heavy his past was, Allah still wanted him back. Allah still invited him to stand, bow, and come close. He walked out of the masjid slowly, each step feeling lighter, almost like he was walking toward a new version of himself. Tonight was the first Taraweeh of his life where the Quran didn't just reach his ears, it reached his soul, and it awakened something he never knew he had. The dua that finally broke the walls. Ayaan had made dua before, quick ones, rushed ones, distracted ones. The kind you whisper because you know you should, not because your heart is spilling over. But tonight was different. After Taraweeh, he found a quiet corner in the masjid, away from the chatter and footsteps. The lights were low, the air cool, the atmosphere still. It felt like the whole world had paused just long enough for him to speak honestly to his Lord. He sat down slowly, pulling his hoodie over his head, knees bent, hands trembling slightly. His heart was beating too fast, not out of fear, but out of a strange anticipation, as if something inside him knew this moment had been waiting for years. He closed his eyes. At first, no words came out, just a heavy breath, then another, and then something inside him cracked open. "Ya Allah," he whispered, voice shaking. Silence. He couldn't continue. His throat tightened. All his regrets, mistakes, losses, heartbreaks, they all crowded his chest at once. He tried again. "Ya Allah, I've been carrying so much." His voice broke. "I'm tired." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't poetic. But they were true. For years, he had been carrying guilt nobody saw, pain nobody understood, and loneliness he never admitted. He buried everything under work, friendships, late nights, long drives, and the noise of American life. But Ramadan cleared that noise, and now his heart stood in front of him with no place to hide. He finally lifted his hands, trembling, shaking, but ready. "Ya Allah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the years I wasted, for the moments I forgot you, for the sins I thought didn't matter, for the nights I didn't pray, for the days I ignored your signs. Ya Allah, please don't turn me away." Tears streamed down his face, hot, uncontrollable, cleansing. "I'm not perfect, but I want to change. I want to come back. I want you in my life again. Please guide me, clean me, fix me." The more he spoke, the lighter he felt. The more he cried, the softer his heart became. It felt like Allah was listening, like the heavens were open, like his dua wasn't rising alone, something was carrying it upward. When he finally lowered his hands, his face was wet, his chest empty, his heart full. Ayaan had made many duas in his life, but tonight, he finally made one with his soul. The transformation on Laylat-ul-Qadr. The night arrived quietly, almost unassumingly. Laylat-ul-Qadr, the night of power. The night that carries a weight no one can measure. A night when supplications are answered, sins forgiven, hearts transformed. Ayaan didn't expect fireworks or divine fanfare. He only expected one thing: to be alone with Allah. He sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, Quran open in front of him, prayer mat beneath, and the city's muted lights filtering through the blinds. The world outside kept moving, lights flickered, cars passed, people slept, but inside, time seemed to stretch, holding its breath. He recited softly, trembling with every verse. His voice cracked, tears streaming down his cheeks. This night, unlike any before, wasn't about perfection. It was about surrender, about finally giving up pretense and facing the one who never turns away. "Ya Allah, if you are pleased with me tonight, let it be a new beginning," he whispered, voice breaking. "Let my sins end here. Let my heart belong to you. Let my life reflect your guidance." Ayaan's mind drifted through his past, his mistakes, his heartbreaks, his moments of rebellion, his nights of emptiness. Every regret, every misstep, every time he had run from Allah's presence. All of it came forward, and yet, instead of despair, he felt something new. A light, a cleansing. He prostrated fully, his forehead pressed to the carpet. And in that moment, he felt it, something heavier than guilt, heavier than fear, lighter than peace. It was transformation. Something deep inside him was being rewritten. His soul, bruised and battered from years of neglect, was being restored. Ya Allah, let this Ramadan not just end in fasting, but in returning, he prayed again. Let me live the lessons of this month every day. Let me be the person you intended me to be. The hours passed unnoticed. The night deepened. The city outside quieted further. Ayaan didn't watch the clock. He didn't count the rakah. He simply stayed in worship, pouring his heart out, letting Allah take what he could not carry himself. When dawn finally approached, Ayaan lifted his head. His face was wet, his chest calm, his heart alive in a way it hadn't been for years. He felt renewed, not perfect, but ready. Ready to live differently, to hold on to what he had found, to never let himself drift so far again. Laylat-ul-Qadr had given him more than forgiveness. It had given him direction, purpose, a soul reborn. And as the first light of Fajr touched his room, Ayaan knew one thing for certain. He was no longer a lost soul. He was a soul returning home. A soul reborn, the dawn of a new life. The first rays of Fajr light spilled gently across Ayaan's room, illuminating the stillness around him. He sat quietly on his prayer mat, heart racing, tears dried but soul alive. Ramadan had been a journey long, painful, beautiful, but today marked something greater, the beginning of a new life. Ayaan stood, feeling the weight of years lifted from his shoulders. He remembered the boy who had felt empty, the man who had run from Allah, the soul that had wandered through stress, heartbreak, and mistakes. That life wasn't gone, it had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. He had returned. He whispered softly, "Ya Allah, thank you for guiding me back. Thank you for never giving up on me." The first dawn of his renewed life wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There were no celebrations, no applause, just the quiet, steady rhythm of his own breathing, in sync with a heart finally aligned with its creator. For the first time in years, Ayaan looked at his world differently. The noise of modern life, the endless emails, social media, traffic, obligations no longer controlled him. He had learned something Ramadan had been teaching him all along. True peace doesn't come from comfort or escape. It comes from connection, surrender, and purpose. He walked to the kitchen, made a simple breakfast, and prayed Fajr fully, completely, with focus he hadn't known he possessed. Each movement standing, bowing, prostrating felt like a thread weaving him back to the life he was meant to live. Not perfect, not flawless, but sincere. For years, he had measured his worth in success, validation, distractions. Now, he measured it in moments like this, in silence, in dua, in gratitude. His sins, his regrets, his lost years, they were no longer chains. They were lessons, stepping stones that brought him closer to Allah. He promised himself he would carry this Ramadan beyond its days. The fasts, the prayers, the late-night duas, they weren't a ritual to end. They were a lifestyle, a mindset, a path of return. Ayaan stepped outside as the sun rose fully, the sky painted in pink and gold. He inhaled deeply, feeling the morning air fill his lungs not just with oxygen, but with life, hope, and renewed purpose. He had started Ramadan as a lost soul. He was ending it as a believer, a servant, a heart transformed. And as the city stirred awake, he whispered one final prayer. "Ya Allah, keep me close to you. Let me never forget this journey. Let me live this life in your light." Ayaan smiled. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was alive, truly alive.